By the time anyone truly noticed her, she had already been there too long. Not long enough to seem suspicious, long enough to feel permanent. The family moved into the house in early spring, a wide two-story place tucked behind trimmed hedges and a white gate that never stayed locked. From the outside it looked quiet, respectable, ordinary. Inside, sound traveled easily. Footsteps echoed down hallways, voices carried through walls, arguments lingered long after they ended. 3 months later, they hired a maid. Her name was Elena. She didn't come from an agency. There were no contracts worth remembering. A neighbor mentioned her casually. She is reliable, needs work. That was enough. Elena arrived with a small suitcase and very little explanation. She spoke softly, nodded often, and asked no questions. The family liked that about her. At first, she worked mornings only, then afternoons, then weekends. Then she stayed late. Eventually, she slept in the spare room. No discussion, no agreement. It happened the same way dust settles, quietly, gradually, until it's everywhere. They joked about it. She's basically part of the house now. She knows the place better than we do. They laughed. Elena didn't, because houses don't laugh. Houses don't listen. Houses don't remember. But Elena did. She learned the sound of each family member's footsteps. She knew who walked heavily when angry, who moved carefully at night, which doors were slammed and which were closed gently out of habit. She learned where the floor creaked, which windows stuck, which lights flickered when left on too long. She learned the house the way people learn a body, through repetition, through closeness, through time. And slowly, something shifted. The house stopped feeling like their home. It began to feel like hers. The disrespect didn't arrive all at once. It never does. At first, it was small. The mother corrected Elena in front of guests. The father spoke about her as if she wasn't standing in the room. The children walked past her without acknowledgement unless they needed something. No thank yous, no eye contact, just expectation. Elena cleaned everything they touched. She wiped fingerprints from glass doors, scrubbed plates still warm from dinner, folded clothes that smelled like perfume, sweat, and familiarity. She saw how careless they were. Money left out in plain sight, phones unlocked, medication unattended, bedroom doors half open. They trusted the house completely, and because Elena lived inside it, they trusted her by default. They spoke freely around her, about money problems, about resentment, about affairs whispered too loudly. They assumed she didn't understand English well. She understood every word. She learned which arguments never resolved, which apologies were fake, which threats were empty. And she learned something else, something quiet and dangerous. They didn't see her as a person. They saw her as a function, a thing that cleaned, a thing that stayed silent, a thing that absorbed messes and disappeared when not needed. At night, when the house slept, Elena stayed awake, not wandering, not sneaking, just sitting, listening to the refrigerator hum, the distant ticking of a clock, the subtle shifting of walls as the house cooled. She wasn't angry yet. She wasn't planning anything. She was doing something much slower. She was redefining who belonged there. The first thing Elena stole from the family wasn't money. It wasn't objects. It wasn't information. It was time. She began staying awake later than usual, long after the house went quiet. Not moving, not cleaning, just listening to the rhythms of the place when no one was watching. The father snored in uneven bursts. The mother woke twice every night, always checking her phone. The children whispered after midnight, screens glowing beneath blankets. Elena learned when the house was most vulnerable. She also learned when they were. During the day, she watched them fracture in small ways. The mother forgot appointments. The father snapped too quickly, then apologized too slowly. The children lied reflexively, even about things that didn't matter. Elena started noticing how often they crossed lines without realizing it. The mother entered Elena's room without knocking, once to check something, another time to take a blanket. The father borrowed money from Elena's pay when he was short, promising to return it later. He didn't. The children treated her room like storage, stepping in without asking, touching things they didn't recognize. None of it felt intentional. That was the problem. It wasn't cruelty born from hatred. It was worse. It was indifference. And indifference is patient. One afternoon, while cleaning the study, Elena did something small. She opened a drawer she had never been told to open. Inside were documents, bank papers, insurance forms, passwords written on scraps of paper, the kind of things people leave out when they believe their world is secure. She didn't take anything, she just read. She learned how much debt the family was hiding. She learned the father's legal name, the one never used socially. She learned the mother's medication schedule and how often refills were requested early. When she closed the drawer, she felt something settle inside her. Not excitement, not fear, clarity. The family believed privacy was something you deserved. Elena understood it was something you protected. And they weren't protecting anything. A house changes when power shifts inside it. At first, the change is subtle. Elena started walking through rooms differently, slower, more deliberate. She didn't avoid being seen. She stopped caring if she was. She stood in doorways longer than necessary, watched conversations finish, let silences stretch. No one commented. They were used to her presence the same way people get used to background noise, always there, never examined. One evening, Elena tested something. She unplugged one of the security cameras near the back hallway, just for a moment. No alarm sounded, no phone notification came. She plugged it back in before anyone noticed. Nothing happened. A few days later, she locked a door from the inside while cleaning and waited. No one knocked. No one questioned it. The house didn't react, and neither did the family. That was when Elena understood something critical. This family relied on systems, not awareness. Technology, routine, assumptions. And systems don't notice intent. They only fail, quietly. Late at night, Elena began walking the house barefoot, not hiding, not sneaking, just moving. She touched walls, rested her hand on banisters, stood in rooms that weren't hers, and imagined them empty. She didn't imagine blood. She didn't imagine violence. She imagined silence. What the house would sound like without arguments, without careless laughter, without doors slamming. She imagined cleaning rooms that stayed clean. For the first time since she arrived, Elena felt something close to ownership. Not over the people, over the space. And once a house chooses someone, it becomes very difficult to take it back. Elena had always thought of the family as individuals, the father with his impatience, the mother with her quiet resentment, the children with their careless cruelty. Different people, different flaws. That changed one afternoon in early winter. The mother was hosting guests, friends from work, loud and comfortable in a house that wasn't theirs. Elena moved between rooms, refilling glasses, clearing plates, wiping spills before anyone noticed them. At one point, she paused near the kitchen doorway. She heard her name, not spoken to her, spoken about her. The mother laughed lightly and said, "She's harmless. She doesn't even realize half of what goes on here." Someone else added, "At least she's quiet." The father smiled and nodded. No one looked at Elena. No one needed to. In that moment, something inside her rearranged itself. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. They weren't separate people. They weren't individuals. They were a unit, a single system that benefited from her silence, her labor, her invisibility. That night, Elena didn't clean the kitchen after dinner. She left a cup on the counter, crumbs on the table. The mess stayed there until morning. No one noticed, or worse, they noticed and assumed she'd fix it later. From then on, Elena stopped thinking in names. She didn't think father, she didn't think mother, she didn't think children. She thought the family. And systems don't deserve empathy, they deserve resolution. Winter pressed in harder than expected. Days grew shorter, nights stretched longer. The family stayed inside more, clustered in their separate rooms, existing together without actually seeing one another. Elena's presence became even less noticeable. She adjusted her routine, not dramatically, just enough. She cleaned certain rooms later than usual, left others untouched until night. She learned which lights could stay off without anyone complaining. She learned how sound traveled when the house was quiet. A footstep on the stairs echoed 3 seconds longer than it should. A door closing upstairs could be heard clearly from the kitchen. The basement carried sound upward, but not downward. She tested it, dropped an object softly, waited. No reaction. She began keeping small things in her room, not weapons, not tools. Keys she was supposed to return, old batteries, a flashlight that no one remembered owning. She memorized the alarm code without looking at the panel. The family typed it openly, casually, the way people do when they believe observation is harmless. One evening the power flickered during a storm. Lights went out for 6 seconds. In those 6 seconds, Elena stood perfectly still in the hallway. She felt something she hadn't expected. Calm. The house was dark, the family was unsettled, and she knew exactly where everyone was. When the lights came back on, no one noticed her standing there, but Elena noticed something else. The house felt aligned, as if it had been waiting for someone to understand it properly. And now that it had, it was no longer neutral. Up until now, Elena had only watched. She learned, she memorized, she waited. But waiting, she realized, still left too much to chance. The first deliberate act wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, it was directional. One morning, the mother accused the father of moving her medication. He denied it. They argued. Elena knew the truth. She had moved the bottle the night before, just a few inches, just enough to be noticed. She hadn't hidden it, she hadn't taken it, she had simply changed where it belonged. The argument escalated faster than usual. Old grievances surfaced, unrelated resentments followed. The children listened from upstairs, absorbing the tension without understanding it. Elena stayed silent. Later that afternoon, the mother asked Elena if she had seen the pills. Elena met her eyes and said softly, "No." It was the first lie she ever told them, and it worked. From that day on, Elena began making small adjustments. She delayed messages, forgot to mention things, misplaced items just long enough to cause suspicion. Nothing obvious, nothing provable. The family started turning inward. They double-checked each other, second-guessed memories, argued over things none of them could confirm. Elena didn't feel guilt, she felt efficiency, because the house no longer reacted to her, it reacted to them. As the family's internal tension grew, something unexpected happened. They began trusting Elena more. The father complained to her about the mother's mood. The mother confided in Elena about feeling trapped. The children spoke freely around her, assuming she was harmless, unimportant. They vented. Elena listened. She didn't offer advice. She didn't take sides. She simply reflected their words back to them later, slightly altered, carefully timed. A comment repeated at the wrong moment. A concern mentioned when emotions were already high. She wasn't inventing conflict, she was redirecting it. The house became louder, doors slammed, voices rose, silences grew heavier. Elena noticed something crucial. They no longer looked at the house as a shared space. They retreated into rooms, locked doors, protected territory. That's when Elena started moving freely again, because when people stop seeing their home as a whole, they stop protecting it together. Late one night, Elena stood at the top of the staircase and listened to the family argue below her. For the first time, she didn't hear individuals. She heard noise, and noise she knew could be quieted. Not yet, but soon, very soon. The first night the family felt afraid. They couldn't explain why. Nothing had happened, no break-in, no alarm, no visible threat, just a feeling, the sense that something inside the house was no longer predictable. It started with the doors. The father woke up to find the back door locked from the inside. He was certain he hadn't locked it. The mother insisted she hadn't either. They checked the locks, the windows, the alarm panel. Everything was normal. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway, silent, holding a mug that had gone cold in her hands. Later that same night, the youngest child woke up crying. He said someone had been standing in the hallway, not moving, not speaking, just standing there. The parents dismissed it as a nightmare. Elena cleaned the hallway the next morning more carefully than usual. She didn't leave footprints. She didn't leave evidence. She only confirmed what she already knew. The house could be sealed from the inside, and once sealed, no one would notice until it was too late. Elena didn't wake up one day and decide to kill the family. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden break. The decision arrived the way erosion does, quietly, over time, until something collapses. The final shift happened during dinner. The family sat together, barely speaking. Tension hovered over the table like a weight. The father accused the mother of hiding money. The mother accused him of lying. The children stared at their plates, pretending not to hear. Elena stood near the counter, clearing dishes that were barely touched. The mother snapped at her for taking a plate too early. "Can't you wait until we're finished?" she said sharply. Elena apologized, out loud. Inside, something settled permanently. She realized then that nothing she did would ever change her place in that house. No amount of loyalty, no amount of silence. She would always be below them, and the house knew it too. That night, Elena sat alone in her room and went over what she already understood. She knew where everyone slept. She knew which doors locked properly and which didn't. She knew the sounds the house made when people moved through it half awake. She didn't plan violence yet. She planned order. And order, she decided, required removal. The night Elena crossed from thought into motion, nothing dramatic happened. No screams, no alarms, no sudden chaos, just a series of small decisions that closed doors one by one. She waited until the house settled into its usual rhythm. The father asleep first, the mother scrolling on her phone, the children whispering until exhaustion won. Elena listened from her room, counting breaths, measuring time. She moved through the hallway slowly, not sneaking, confident. She locked the back door, checked the front, disabled the alarm the way she had practiced, calm hands, steady pace. Then she returned to her room and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. At some point in the night, the mother woke and tried to leave her bedroom. The door didn't open, not jammed, not broken, locked. The mother rattled the handle once, twice, then stopped. Across the hall, the father tried his door, same result. The house didn't echo with panic, it absorbed it. Elena lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the sound of people realizing they weren't alone and also weren't free. By morning, no one mentioned it, no one accused, no one demanded answers. Fear, Elena knew, often starts by convincing people to stay quiet. Daylight didn't make the house feel safer. It exposed how fragile it had become. The family moved carefully, speaking less, watching each other with suspicion. They tested locks, checked windows, tried to understand what had happened without saying it out loud. Elena made breakfast as usual, coffee poured, plates set, everything normal. That's what disturbed them most. The mother asked, carefully, if Elena had noticed anything strange the night before. Elena shook her head. The lie came easily now. The father checked the security footage later that day. There were gaps, not obvious ones, just missing minutes, frozen frames, moments that refused to load. He blamed the system. Elena listened from the doorway. By afternoon, the family stopped trying to leave the house. They stayed inside, as if instinct told them that outside help would only complicate things. That's when Elena understood the final truth. The house was no longer a home. It was a container. Everything inside it moved according to rules she understood, and they didn't. She adjusted the locks again that night, just slightly, not to trap them completely, not yet, but enough to remind the house who controlled its boundaries. And once boundaries are controlled, everything else becomes a matter of time. The realization didn't come all at once. It came in fragments. The mother noticed Elena always knew where everyone was. The father realized she never asked questions anymore. The children felt watched, even when no one was in the room. It was the way Elena stood now, still, centered, unapologetic. One afternoon, the father confronted her in the kitchen, not aggressively, not loudly, just a question. "Did you touch the alarm system?" Elena met his eyes. She didn't answer immediately. That pause, less than a second, was enough. In that moment, the family saw her, not as staff, not as background, as presence. Elena finally spoke. "No." The father nodded, but something in his expression changed. Suspicion, yes, but also confusion, because deep down, he knew something worse than betrayal was happening. Control had shifted, and he didn't understand how. From that point on, they watched her. But watching isn't the same as acting, and fear has a way of making people hesitate. That night, the family decided to leave. Not dramatically, not together. The mother packed a small bag. The father waited by the front door. The children stayed in their rooms, instructed not to make noise. The plan was simple. Leave quietly, figure things out later. The front door didn't open. The father tried again, harder, nothing. He checked the deadbolt. Locked. He turned toward the hallway and froze. Elena stood there, not blocking the door, not threatening, just standing. "You can't leave," she said calmly. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. The father demanded answers. The mother raised her voice. Elena didn't react. She stepped aside and walked back toward the kitchen, as if the conversation was over. And somehow, it was. Because the family didn't follow her. They didn't chase. They didn't force the door. They stood there, stunned by the realization that the house no longer responded to them. That night, the children cried quietly. The parents whispered plans that went nowhere. Elena slept. For the first time since arriving at the house, she slept deeply, because the house was sealed, and everything sealed eventually reaches its conclusion. The house changed again after the failed escape. Not loudly, not suddenly. It became quieter in a way that felt deliberate. The family stopped arguing, stopped accusing, stopped pretending they were in control. They moved carefully now, measuring each word, each step, each glance in Elena's direction. She noticed everything. The mother stopped leaving her room except when necessary. The father tried to assert authority in small ways, standing straighter, speaking louder, but it felt rehearsed. The children avoided Elena entirely. That avoidance told her something important. They no longer saw her as invisible. They saw her as unpredictable. That night, Elena made a decision she had been circling for weeks, not because she was angry, not because she felt wronged, but because the house had reached a state of imbalance. Too much fear, too much tension, too much waiting. She waited until the house settled into stillness. Then she moved. Not fast, not hesitant. She entered the hallway and stood there, listening. The family stayed in their rooms. No one called out. No one challenged her. Silence, Elena realized, could be consent. And once silence accepts something, it rarely takes it back. The next morning, something was different. The father didn't come downstairs. The mother noticed first. She stood at the base of the stairs for a long time, calling his name softly, then louder. There was no response. She didn't go up. She looked at Elena instead. Elena met her gaze without expression. The house felt heavier, not violent, not chaotic, resolved. The mother sat down at the kitchen table and cried, not loudly, not hysterically, just enough to be heard. Elena poured her a glass of water and placed it in front of her. The gesture wasn't kindness, it was finality. The children stayed in their rooms all day. No laughter, no whispers, no movement. By evening, the mother stopped crying. She stopped speaking altogether. When Elena passed her in the hallway, the woman pressed herself against the wall, eyes down, shoulders tight. Elena understood then there would be no rebellion, no dramatic confrontation. The family wasn't fighting anymore. They were enduring. And endurance, Elena knew, only delays an ending. It does not prevent it. After that day, the house settled into a rhythm that felt almost rehearsed. Breakfast appeared on the table every morning. Lunch followed. Dinner too. Doors opened, doors closed, but fewer voices filled the rooms. One of the children stopped coming downstairs entirely. Food was left outside the bedroom door. Sometimes it was taken, sometimes it wasn't. Elena never asked which. The mother moved like a guest in her own home now, quiet, apologetic, careful not to occupy too much space. She avoided mirrors, she avoided windows, she avoided Elena's eyes most of all. And Elena thrived on the order. She cleaned more than necessary, organized drawers that had already been organized, straightened photographs that no one looked at anymore. The house felt lighter to her, balanced. She began sleeping better. At night she would sit alone in the living room, lights off, listening to the subtle sounds of the house, the pipes, the settling wood, the distant hum of electricity. She knew every sound by heart, and she knew which ones had stopped. What struck her most was not guilt, it was how easily the house adapted, how quickly a place can accept fewer people, as if it had been waiting. There was no scream, no struggle loud enough to travel through the walls, no dramatic interruption. What happened next occurred in the kind of quiet that rarely draws attention, the quiet of routine, of expectation, of inevitability. Later, investigators would search for a single defining moment, a fight, a confession, a breaking point. They would not find one, because the end didn't arrive as an event. It arrived as a conclusion everyone had already accepted. When the last light went off that night, the house entered a stillness deeper than sleep. Elena remained awake. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, listening to the absence of sound. For the first time since she arrived years ago, there was no tension in the air, no fear radiating from closed doors, no resistance humming beneath the floorboards. Only completion. And in that moment, Elena understood something chillingly simple. Some endings don't announce themselves. They just stop being interrupted. Morning arrived the way it always had. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. The kettle clicked off by itself. Dust floated lazily in the kitchen air. Nothing looked wrong. That was the most disturbing part. Elena prepared breakfast out of habit, not necessity. Plates were set where people used to sit. Cups were filled and left untouched. She waited. No footsteps came. She walked the house slowly, deliberately, as if giving it time to respond. Each room told the same story. Beds undisturbed, curtains drawn, belongings exactly where they had been left. The house wasn't hiding anything. It was finished. Elena opened a window for the first time in days. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying sounds from the street. Cars passing, distant voices, a barking dog. Life continuing, unaware. She stood there for a long time, letting the noise wash over her, grounding her in the ordinary world again. Then she closed the window. The house didn't need the outside anymore. It took days before anyone questioned the silence. At first, neighbors assumed the family was traveling. They had done that before. A quiet household wasn't unusual. But small things began to stand out. Mail piled up. Lights never turned on at night. Trash bins stayed empty. One neighbor mentioned it casually, another shrugged. No one wanted to be the first to interfere. Elena was seen once, standing in the doorway collecting a package. She smiled politely, thanked the delivery driver. Nothing about her seemed wrong. That, more than anything else, delayed discovery. When concern finally grew serious, it wasn't fear that drove it. It was inconvenience, a smell, a complaint, a call made reluctantly. By the time authorities arrived, the house had already sealed itself in memory. What they found would later be described in reports as orderly, controlled, and deliberate. Words that struggled to explain how something so complete could have unfolded so quietly. And in the middle of it all, Elena waited, calm, composed, as if she had been expecting them. Elena did not resist when they knocked. She opened the door calmly, stepped aside, and let them enter as if they were late guests. The officers expected confusion, panic, denial. They found none. Elena answered every question without hesitation. Her voice was steady, her posture relaxed. She did not ask for a lawyer. She did not ask what would happen next. When asked why, she paused, not because she struggled to answer, but because she seemed to consider whether the question itself mattered. "They stopped being a family long before I ended it," she said finally. In the days that followed, experts would argue over motives, power, resentment, mental illness, gradual dehumanization. None of the explanations fully fit. There was no history of violence, no written confession, no moment where everything clearly snapped, just years of quiet service, emotional erosion, and a house that slowly rearranged its hierarchy without anyone noticing. Elena had not forced her way into control. She had been given it, piece by piece, through neglect, fear, and silence. When the trial ended, the verdict felt inevitable. But even then, something unsettled those who studied the case. Elena never claimed innocence, and she never expressed regret. She simply stated, again and again, "I kept the house running." The house was sold, renovated, repainted, renamed. New owners moved in, unaware of the weight beneath the floors. They complained once about a strange feeling in the hallway, another time about doors that seemed heavier than they should be. Eventually, life went on. Elena's name faded from headlines. The case was reduced to a few paragraphs in criminal psychology textbooks. But those who read closely noticed something chilling. The investigators never found evidence of a single violent outburst. No chaos, no frenzy, no rage. Only consistency, only routine. Only a woman who understood something terrifyingly simple. You don't have to destroy a family all at once. Sometimes you just replace it, quietly, until no one realizes it's gone.